Chosen one. Something has already been decided about you, not by a committee, not by a crowd, by the one who laid the foundations of the world. Before you were formed, before you had a name, before you made a single choice, a specific work was commissioned for you. A specific hour was marked. A specific assignment was written with your particular nature in mind. The way you see things, the way you carry weight, the way you have never been able to fully stop believing, even in the seasons when you tried. And here is what I need you to understand today. That assignment has not been cancelled. God has not given it to someone else. He has not grown tired of waiting for you. But here is also what is true. Every commissioned work has a window. Every assignment has an appointed hour. And the ache you feel right now, that restlessness, that quiet sense of being behind, is not punishment. It is not evidence of failure. It is a signal. It is the sound of a clock you cannot see, telling you that the window is open. You did not find this message by accident. Something moved and arranged for these words to reach you today. That is not language designed to make you feel better. That is the nature of how God calls the people He made to carry weight. He sends a word before He opens a door. The question is not whether you were chosen. The question is whether you will answer while the door is still standing open. Now, I want to stay with something for a moment, because I believe the reason you are still here right now is that you recognized yourself in something I just said. And before I go deeper, I want to name what that recognition looks like, because there are specific signs that appear in the life of someone who has been holding a calling for a long time without fully stepping into it. The first is a particular kind of emptiness, not depression, not sadness in the way most people mean it, something more specific than that. It is a hollow feeling that shows up even on good days, even when life is objectively functioning, even when you have nothing obvious to complain about, like something is absent that you cannot name and have not been able to name for years. You have learned to build your days around it. You have learned to keep moving, but the hollow space has never filled. The second is the comparison ache. Not jealousy, exactly something quieter, something you are almost embarrassed to admit. It is the experience of watching someone else occupy what felt like your space. Someone younger, someone with less history, less pain, less apparent preparation. And something in you does not understand why them and not you. And you have not been able to fully walk away from that question, no matter how many times you told yourself to let it go. The third is a shift in your tolerance. Somewhere along the way, things that once felt acceptable began to feel unbearable. Conversations that used to be fine started to drain you. Environments that once felt comfortable started to feel suffocating. You pulled back from certain people and certain places without being able to give anyone a clean explanation for it. You just knew you could no longer afford to stay. And the people around you may not have understood that, but something in you did. The fourth visits you at night. Dreams that are more than ordinary dreams, vivid, directional, specific in a way that your regular sleep is not. You wake from them carrying something, not just an image, but a sense that something was communicated while you slept. Sometimes those dreams connect to things in your waking life in ways that do not make sense on paper, but that you cannot dismiss either. And the fifth, the one I believe is the deepest reason you are still watching right now, is the knowing that will not leave. You have tried to walk away from it. In certain seasons, you decided you were done. You told yourself to be realistic. You made peace with a smaller version of your life. And then, something pulled you back. Not logic, not evidence, just something. The knowing returned. It has always returned. That is not delusion. That is not self-deception. That is a signal from a frequency that does not broadcast on human radio. The assignment is still active, and the part of you that recognizes it, that is the truest part of you. Before I go any further, I want to ask something of you. Stay with this message through the end, because what I am going to show you in the sections ahead is not a general encouragement. I am going to show you two kinds of time and why measuring yourself against the wrong one has been costing you years of clarity. I am going to show you what God has actually been building inside you during the seasons that felt like silence. And I am going to give you something practical, a way to step through the door that is standing open right now. Not next year, not when conditions are better, but today. If you leave before the end, you will miss the part of this message that was placed here for this specific moment in your life. Stay. Now, I want to honor something before I go any further, because most voices in this space move quickly to the encouragement. They get to the good news fast, and I understand why encouragement feels better than sitting in what hurts. But grief that is not honored does not disappear. It just goes underground. And I am not interested in building anything on a foundation we have not cleared. So, let me say this plainly. Just because the years have passed and the promise has not yet arrived, it does not mean you heard wrong. Just because the evidence has kept saying, wait, it does not mean the calling was not real. Just because no one around you can see what you are carrying, it does not mean it is not there. You started believing in something, a sense of purpose that arrived before you had the words for it, a calling that felt specific to you, not borrowed from someone else's story. And then the years came, and they brought many things, but not that, not the thing you had held on for. And you stayed, and you waited, and you kept showing up for a God who felt increasingly quiet. And at some point, maybe recently, maybe longer ago than you want to admit, you began to wonder if you had heard wrong, if the calling was ever real, if maybe God had moved on to someone more prepared, more obedient, more ready. That moment, the moment of doubt after years of faithfulness, is one of the heaviest things a person can carry. And I want you to know, I see the weight of it, not as failure, as evidence. Only someone carrying something real suffers this kind of loss when it delays. But there is something I need to show you, because the ache you have been carrying has a specific quality that is not random, and understanding where that quality comes from will change how you see everything. The ancient Greeks, the ones who wrote in the language the New Testament was recorded in, had two completely separate words for time. Two words for what we collapse into one. And the difference between those two words explains more about your delay than anything else I could say to you today. I will get to that. I promise you I will. But first, I need to give you one image, because it is going to be the thread that runs through everything ahead. There is a tree, the largest, most ancient trees on Earth, the ones that have survived centuries, the ones whose roots run deeper than their branches stretch high. They spend the most time underground before they ever appear above the surface. More time than the trees that grow fast and fall in the first strong wind. More time than the ones that reach a certain height and stop. What felt like being buried was actually being planted. What felt like nothing happening was actually the most important work happening below the surface, where no one could see it. You have been underground. You have been doing root work. And what those years have actually been building while you could not see it, that is what this message is about. But the full picture becomes clear only when you understand those two words for time, because when you see how they are different and which one your assignment was written in, you will understand why you are actually late. And it has nothing to do with what you think. There is a word in the ancient Greek, kairos, and it sounds simple when you first hear it, but what it actually means is completely different from what we usually call time. The other Greek word for time is chronos. Chronos is the clock on your wall. It is sequential, measurable, perfectly equal for every person on Earth. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 365 days in a year, without exception and without mercy. Chronos does not pause for your grief. It does not wait while you recover from a loss. It does not hold while you find your footing again. It keeps moving with complete indifference to where you are in your story. Kairos is something else entirely. Kairos is the appointed moment, not the next moment on the calendar, the right moment. The specific convergence when you are ready and the circumstances are aligned and the assignment can actually land with the impact it was designed to carry. Kairos does not move on a schedule you can plan around. It does not arrive simply because enough time has passed. It arrives when the conditions, internal and external, reach the configuration it was waiting for. In the book of Ecclesiastes, the ancient writer says, "To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven." The word for time in the original language is kairos, a specific, appointed, non-repeating moment that belongs to a specific thing. And here is the thing that will change how you see your entire story. You have been measuring your life against Chronos, counting the years, comparing your position to other people's position, asking why they moved forward and you have not, applying a clock to your calling that was not built for it, because your assignment was written in Kairos. And those two things do not run on the same logic. You cannot manufacture a Kairos moment by working harder. You cannot accelerate it through better strategy or more consistent effort or more visible faith. When you try to force it, and most people who carry a real calling have tried, it does not open faster. In certain seasons it delays, because applying Chronos pressure to a Kairos appointment is like trying to unlock something with the wrong key. The mechanism simply does not respond to what you are bringing to it. This is not a theory. This is a pattern that runs through the life of every person who was ever given a significant assignment. There was a man named Joseph, and if you know his story, I want you to hear it differently today, not as inspiration, but as architecture. Joseph received a clear vision of his calling early in his life. Not ambiguous, not open to interpretation, clear. And then 13 years passed between that vision and the day it became real. 13 years, not as a punishment, not as a test of endurance for the sake of the test, but because the world that Joseph was designed to serve was not yet positioned to receive what he was carrying. Pharaoh needed to have a specific dream at a specific time. A specific conversation needed to happen in a specific prison on a specific day. The entire structure of an ancient empire needed to shift into a configuration that would allow Joseph's calling to land with the weight it was designed to carry. Joseph could not rush that. He could not engineer it from inside a prison cell. He could not make Pharaoh dream before Pharaoh was ready to dream. All he could do was become, in the wilderness of his circumstances, the person who would be capable of holding what was about to be placed in his hands. And then, on what had looked from the outside like an ordinary day, in a year that had seemed no different from the ones before it, Kairos arrived. Not gradually, suddenly. Just because the world around you has not yet moved into the right position does not mean it is not moving right now. Moses spent 40 years in a desert, 40 years that looked, from every external measurement, like a life that had contracted, a prince who had become a shepherd, a man with education and history and a name, tending animals in a wilderness with no audience and no visibility and no sign of the thing he had once believed he was meant to do. And then, the burning bush. In one moment, on what was supposed to be an ordinary workday, everything that had seemed cancelled became real. The assignment that had been written before Moses was born, that he had believed in and then given up on, and then learned to stop talking about it, arrived, in its fullness, without apology for how long it had taken. Moses did not feel ready. He listed his weaknesses to God. He asked to be excused from what was being asked of him. But God did not want someone else. He wanted the man the desert had made, the man who had been stripped of his own agenda, the man who could not be impressed by earthly power anymore because he had already lost it all and survived, the man whose ego had been sanded down by 40 years of quiet and obscurity. Moses went in as a prince. He came out as a shepherd. He walked out as a deliverer. The wilderness does not disqualify the person it forms. It qualifies them in ways that comfort and visibility never could. And this is where it becomes specific to you, not as a story from history, as a description of something that has been happening inside you, right now, in this body, in this brain, in this life. Something that has a name, something that science has found language for relatively recently. And when you hear it, when you understand what has been suppressed and why, and what it means for where you are, you will never look at these years the same way. There is a process that researchers have documented and named the decline effect. It begins around age 7, and it describes what happens to a specific kind of brain activity as a person moves through the conditions of modern life. Not a disease. Not a permanent deficiency, a suppression, a systematic reduction of something that was natural and operating at full capacity in childhood, something the brain produces freely when it is not under chronic stress, not under performance pressure, not under the fear of being wrong or being seen as insufficient. That brain activity is measured in frequencies. The frequency most dramatically affected by the decline effect, the one that researchers at institutions like MIT and Princeton and Stanford have been documenting for decades, is called gamma. Gamma is not a metaphor. It is a real, measurable state of brain activity that shows up on equipment as a distinct wave pattern. And what those researchers have found is that gamma is the state associated with intuition, with creative flow, with learning that happens almost effortlessly, with the kind of synchronicity that seems like coincidence, but arrives too precisely and too consistently to be random. It is the state that children operate in naturally before the systems of the world take hold. Watch a child who has not yet been taught to be afraid of being wrong. Watch how they connect ideas that adults cannot connect. Watch how quickly they learn things no one taught them directly. Watch how they seem to exist in a kind of flow that adults have to work hard to access even briefly. That is gamma. That is not magic. That is a frequency of brain activity that is native to them and that has not yet been suppressed. And here is what makes this specific to the person watching this right now. The one who was built for a significant calling, who came into the world with a sensitivity that people around them could not fully explain, who saw patterns others could not see, who knew things they had not been taught. They did not have average gamma to begin with. They had more. Which means, when the decline effect arrived and the systems of the world began their suppression, the loss was not average either. The gap between the person you remember being as a child, the one who learned fast, who felt things at a depth other kids did not seem to reach, who had instincts that turned out to be right in ways you still cannot fully explain, and the person you feel like now, that gap is the size of your gamma loss. And it is not a character failure. It is not spiritual weakness. It is a neurological history that has a very specific shape and a very specific cause. And then I discovered something. A researcher who had spent 34 years working at the intersection of neuroscience and applied sound had published findings about a specific mechanism, a way to reactivate gamma in an adult brain that had been suppressed for decades, not through years of meditation practice, not through clinical equipment that most people could never access, through sound, a specific application of audio that works directly on the brain's frequency, from the outside in a matter of minutes. I will come back to exactly what that means and what he built from that research. But I want you to hold that because it connects directly to what I am about to show you about what God has been building in you while the suppression was working against you. Before I get there, I want to pause, because I hear something being placed on my heart right now for someone who is watching. Someone who heard everything I said about Kairos and Joseph and Gamma and still has a quiet voice inside them saying, "That is probably for other people." This is what I hear the Father saying for that person. "My child, I saw every year. Every morning you woke up and made the choice to believe one more day, when the night before you had already decided to stop. Every moment, the evidence said quit, and something in you said, not yet. I was there in that moment. Every prayer that felt like it went nowhere. Every time you watched someone else step into what felt like your space, and you stayed faithful anyway, and did not let anyone see how much that cost you. I saw every one of them. Every single one. Not one slipped past unnoticed. Not one was wasted. Not one was empty time that I was absent from. I was building something in you that requires longer to build than most people ever have to understand. And what was built in those years, I am about to show you. That is not consolation. That is a report from the one who sees what you cannot see from where you are standing. And now remember what I said about the seed, about the root work that happens underground before anything appears above the surface. I want to show you exactly what has been growing down there. Because what you are about to see will change how you understand not just the waiting, but yourself. There are 3 reasons the preparation has taken this long. Not because I need to fill the time with explanations, but because when you see each one clearly, the math of your life changes. The years stop being a loss column and start becoming something else entirely. The first reason is the depth of character your assignment requires. What you were built to carry cannot be held by someone who still needs external approval to feel secure in who they are. It cannot be safely held by someone who would use a platform for visibility before they had been through genuine invisibility. It cannot be held by someone who has not survived the kind of collapse that removes everything temporary and leaves only what is real. The world has no shortage of talented people who broke under the first serious opposition, who made it to the edge of their calling and crumbled when the weight of it became real, who never recovered from the moment when God said now, and they reached for the old version of themselves that was no longer there. What was being built in you through the years you thought were empty, through the seasons you could not explain to anyone around you, was a character that does not break at the threshold. A person who has already survived the worst fears internally and came out on the other side of them. That is not common, and it cannot be produced quickly. The second reason is that there were versions of you that had to be removed. This one takes courage to hear, because it means some of what felt like loss was actually subtraction. Strategic, necessary, purposeful subtraction. The version of you that needed everyone's agreement before moving forward, that had to go. The version that would have taken the assignment and used it to prove something rather than to serve something, that had to go. The version that was still performing identity rather than living from it, that had to go. God was not punishing you in those stripping seasons. He was making room, because what he was preparing to place in your hands could not share space with those older versions of you. They would have complicated the assignment, not through malice, through immaturity. And he loved you too much to release the full weight of your calling into hands that were not yet ready to hold it the right way. The third reason is the most practical of the 3. You were not just being prepared to receive something, you were being prepared to carry it. There is a difference. Receiving is a moment, carrying is a life. And what you were built to carry, not just for yourself, but for the people waiting on the other side of your breakthrough, requires a kind of structural strength that does not get assembled in comfortable seasons. Every engineer knows, before you load a structure with the real weight it was designed for, you test it first. You apply pressure beyond what it will eventually need to hold, to confirm that it will not give way when the real load arrives. You have been tested, not randomly, comprehensively. And what those tests were building in you, below the surface, below the line of anyone else's visibility, was a root system. What you called wasted years was root development. What you called being overlooked was underground formation. What you called falling behind was being made structurally capable of holding what was about to be placed in your hands. Think about the oldest, most enduring trees on Earth, the ones that have stood for centuries, that have survived storms that leveled everything around them, that reach heights no shorter-rooted tree can approach. Those trees spent the most time underground before they ever appeared above the surface. The depth of the root system is what makes the height possible. Without the years below the ground, the growth above it would not hold. You have been building roots, and root work is almost entirely invisible, and it is, without question, the most important work of all. Now, there is something else I need to name, because understanding the formation is only part of what is needed here. There is a pattern, and for many of the people watching this right now, it has been operating quietly underneath their awareness that has been stopping them at the threshold every time the door began to open. And it has to be named before you can walk through this one. The first pattern is trying to force it. When the door showed the smallest gap, the instinct was to push. More effort, more output, more strategy. And every time you pushed, something shifted, but not in the direction you needed. Because Kairos windows do not open under pressure, they open under alignment. And alignment is not the same thing as effort. You cannot engineer an appointed moment. You can only be ready for it when it arrives. The second pattern is more painful to acknowledge. There have been moments when the door opened genuinely, fully, the right way, and something inside you found a reason to move back from it. Not deliberately, not consciously, but at the exact moment when things became real, when the weight of the opportunity became tangible, something chose the familiar over the threshold. And you have never fully understood why. That is not weakness. That is the behavior of a person who has been disappointed enough times that something in them began protecting itself from hope. The nervous system learned to treat breakthrough as danger before it had a chance to learn to treat it as home. And the third pattern, the one that almost no one talks about openly in this kind of conversation, is the fear not of failing, but of actually arriving. The fear that if this becomes real, you will be responsible for maintaining it, that people will watch you carrying something significant and expect you to keep carrying it well, that the version of you who succeeds will be someone you do not fully recognize yet, that you will be held accountable to a size of assignment that still feels, on some quiet internal level, like it belongs to someone slightly larger than who you currently are. That fear is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of wisdom. People who handle calling carelessly are not afraid of receiving it because they have not yet grasped the weight of it. Your fear is the sign that you understand what you are being entrusted with. It is not your enemy, but it cannot be the one making your decisions. And this is what I want to say to you now. Receive this without arguing with it. You are allowed to outgrow the patterns that formed in the hard seasons. You are allowed to stop backing away from the moment things become real. You are allowed to let the door open without your own hand, finding a reason to close it again. You are allowed to step into what was written for you without having a clean explanation ready for every person who questions it. And you do not owe anyone an apology for finally becoming the person this assignment always required you to be. Now, I want to give you something practical, because understanding is only valuable if it changes how you move. I call this the Kairos audit. 3 questions, not a test, a clarity instrument. It will tell you something honest about where you are standing right now and what is actually keeping you there. The first question, is what is stopping me right now a genuine lack of readiness, or is it the fear of what readiness would require me to give up? The second question, have I been waiting for the conditions to become perfect, or have I actually been waiting for my courage to finally catch up to my calling? And the third, the one that cuts through everything else. If I knew with certainty that the window would close in 30 days, would I still be waiting for the exact same thing I am currently waiting for? The Kairos audit is not meant to produce guilt. It is meant to produce clarity. It tells you whether you are genuinely in divine timing or whether you have been using the language of divine timing as shelter from movement. Those are 2 different conditions, and you need to know which one is true for you right now. But there is one more thing I have not yet told you, and it is the part that will make everything I have said so far the 2 kinds of time, the formation, the root work, the patterns snap into place as a single picture. It is the revelation that recontextualizes the entire story of your delay. And when you receive it, I need you to be open to it landing somewhere deeper than your understanding. What I am about to say, I want to say slowly, because the mind has a tendency to receive important things at the surface level and move past them before they have had a chance to actually settle into the right place. So stay with me here. You were not late. You were being made ready. That is not a consolation. That is not the spiritual version of everything happens for a reason. That is a precise and accurate description of what has actually been happening in your life during the years that looked like delay from the outside and felt like stagnation from the inside. The root work was real. The formation was real. The testing was real. And the result of it, the person sitting inside the body of the one watching this right now, is also real and complete and ready. The preparation is finished. The roots have grown deep enough to hold the tree. And what I hear the Spirit saying today, for someone who has been carrying this for longer than they want to say out loud, is simply this. It is time. Not when you feel completely prepared. Not when the fear has settled into something manageable. Not when the people in your life finally understand what you are moving toward. Now, this season, this moment, as a beginning point. And before I say anything else, I want to give you a word from the original language, because I believe it belongs to someone watching right now. In the book of Joel, God speaks a promise. I will restore the years the locust has eaten. Most people hear that and picture a fair exchange, getting back what was taken in roughly the same amount it was taken, an even return, a balanced ledger. But the word in the original Hebrew is shalom, and shalom does not mean an even exchange. Shalom means to be made whole, to be made complete, to be repaid not just in full, but with what compounds on top of the original loss. It is the language of a debt being settled not at face value, but with interest, the kind of interest that accumulates over years. It is as if someone took something valuable from you, and a court found them guilty and ordered them to return not just the original amount, but 5 times what was taken. Not out of generosity, because that is what the law of Shalom demands. Overpayment, disproportionate return, a restoration that exceeds the original condition. The years that felt like loss, God is not planning to return them simply at face value. He is planning to overpay for them. And what comes back will not be proportional to what the waiting cost. It will be beyond proportion, and that is not coincidence, and that is not luck, and that is not a reward for perfect faithfulness. That is shalom. And I hear the Father saying this, for the one who has stayed through to this moment, who came in wondering if they had been forgotten and is still here. My child, you were not late, you were being made ready, and I am saying to you now, go. Not when the fear has passed, because the fear will not fully pass before you begin, and it was never meant to. Not when everyone around you understands, because they will understand after, not before. Not when you feel certain, because certainty is not what I require of you. What I require is what I required of Moses at the burning bush. One step, movement in the direction of what I placed in you before you were born. Go. I will not send you and then leave you. I will go with you, every step of the way, into the thing we have both been waiting for. Now, in an earlier part of this message, I told you about a researcher and something he called a specific mechanism for reactivating gamma frequency in an adult brain that had been suppressed for decades. I said I would come back to it. We are here. But before I describe what he built, I need you to understand why it matters specifically to someone like you, and not just anyone who happens to hear about it. If the things I described earlier resonated with you at a personal level, the knowing that would not leave, the sense of living below your actual capacity, the feeling of having been more naturally connected to something as a child than you have been able to access as an adult, here is what that tells me about you. You were not born with average gamma. You were born with more of it than the people around you. That is what people were pointing at when they called you gifted or sensitive or unusually perceptive as a child. What they were observing was your natural gamma operating at full strength. And when the systems of modern life produced the decline effect I described earlier, the distance you fell was not average either, because you fell from a higher place. The gap between the person you remember being and the person you feel like now is larger than most, and it has a specific cause, and it is not permanent. There is a woman whose story I want to share with you. She had spent years in genuine searching, not casual exploration, disciplines, practices, sincere and sustained effort to find something real. She was not dabbling. She was not looking for shortcuts. She was looking for the experience of actual alignment, of things flowing and connecting in ways that felt like more than coincidence, of the frequency she somehow remembered from earlier in her life and could not find her way back to. She did not find what I am about to describe because she had finally perfected her spiritual practice. She found it, as she said herself, because she had nothing left to lose. 2 weeks after beginning a specific 7-minute daily practice, she wrote something that I want you to hear. She said, "I cannot explain what changed, but the synchronicities began arriving, the right conversations appearing from directions I had not thought to look, doors opening in ways that felt personally arranged, like something that had been suppressed had been cleared, like a frequency had been restored that I had forgotten how to reach on my own." She stopped searching for the frequency. She became it. What that woman experienced is what happens when a brain is returned to its natural gamma state after years of suppression. And the way she got there was through a technology developed by a neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake, who spent 34 years studying the relationship between sound frequencies and the brain's own wave patterns. What Dr. Lake created is called the Genius Song. It is a 7-minute audio track, not a meditation, not ambient background sound, a precisely engineered file that uses a technology called brain entrainment, studied for decades at MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, and multiple other research institutions to guide the brain back toward gamma activity through the auditory pathway. You listen through headphones. You let the frequency do what it was designed to do. You do not need to sit a particular way or follow any specific practice. You listen. And the research behind this is not a theory. It is measurable on equipment. It is reproducible across subjects. And over 18,000 people have now experienced it. I want to speak directly to the thought that may be forming right now. You have tried things before, and they did not produce what was promised. I understand that. And here is the honest distinction. What you tried before, meditation, breathwork, sound healing, those work through a completely different mechanism. Traditional meditation requires months, often years, to produce measurable shifts in gamma activity. Brain entrainment engages the frequency directly. The mechanism is not the same. The timeline is not the same. The first session begins working from the moment you listen. To access genuine gamma activation through clinical means, biofeedback therapy runs $300 per session. Professional home equipment runs around $7,000. And even with that investment, the process is gradual. Dr. Lake compressed 34 years of research into a 7-minute file you can access today with any pair of headphones. The original price for this technology is $49. For those watching this specific message, those who Dr. Lake believes are genuinely ready rather than simply curious, the price is $39. That price does not exist on Amazon. It is not available on Spotify or any other platform. It was created specifically for people hearing this, and the link I have placed in the description and in the pinned comment below is the only place it exists. At $39, you receive the 7-minute track, a second audio called Genius Child, developed for children to support their natural gamma, the original text that gave rise to The Secret, a book that sells for $20 on its own, a guided visualization for the 4 major areas of life, and a detailed infographic of the 5 most important daily practices for building toward the life you were designed for. All of it covered by a 100% money-back guarantee. No conditions. No time limit on the guarantee. If you listen and notice no difference, you receive a full refund. The only real risk is choosing not to try. One more thing that matters. There are sites online that have taken the name of this technology and attached it to audio files with no gamma entrainment embedded in them at all. Regular sound files. No mechanism. No effect. The only way to receive the original technology, the complete set of bonuses, and the guarantee is through the link in the description and in the pinned comment of this message. Not through a search. Not through any other source. Only there. If what I just described resonates with something in you, if part of you recognizes it, the details are in the pinned comment below. Investigate only if you feel led. And I want to say this before I move forward. The version of you that walks through the window that is open right now, that version has already made a decision about this. Not because they were completely certain, because they understood that Kairos moments do not arrive feeling perfect. They arrive feeling right. And right is not the same as fear being absent. Right is moving in the right direction while carrying the fear as a passenger, not letting it drive. Now, I want to give you something to do with the years you thought were lost. Not a philosophy about them, something you can actually practice. I call this the Lateness Reframe Protocol. And it is simple, and it is not optional if you want to stop carrying these years the way you have been. Every time a memory surfaces of a season where you were waiting and nothing moved, where you were believing and nothing arrived, where you looked around at your life and felt behind, I want you to speak this inside yourself. That season was not wasted. It was invested. It was root work. It was the foundation being laid for what I am now capable of holding. You are not reciting something you hope is true. You are correcting a narrative that disappointment wrote without your permission, using language that fear provided. You are stating a fact that the silence of those years obscured from view but did not change. Every year you doubted and stayed anyway. Every year you considered stopping and chose one more day. Every year the evidence pointed away from the calling, and something inside you refused to agree. That is not coincidence. That is a formation record, and it is yours. Now, I want to declare something over you, because there are identities written on your life that need to be spoken out loud in this moment, not simply implied. You are a pioneer. You are not following a cleared path. You are making one. That is why no one could give you a complete instruction set for what you are called to, because it has not been done in exactly this way by anyone before you. The uncertainty was not a sign that you were on the wrong path. It was confirmation that you were on the first one. You are a spiritual warrior, not because you fought visibly, because you did not collapse, when collapsing would have been the most understandable response. You held ground in seasons where the ground itself seemed to be dissolving. That is not stubbornness. That is warfare, conducted quietly, and it was won. You are a deliverer. The breakthrough you step into is not only for you. There are specific people with names and faces and needs, who are waiting on the other side of your yes. You are not running late for yourself alone. You are running late for them as well. And your movement matters to them, even if they do not yet know your name. You are a voice. The reason the calling kept returning every time you tried to walk away from it is that you were built to articulate something that others in your generation can only feel but cannot find words for. When you speak from what was formed in you in the wilderness, something in the room changes. That is not personality. That is assignment. And you are a cycle breaker. What ends with you is generational. What begins with you will outlast you. The limitations, the ceilings, the things that were accepted as permanent in the world you came from, they end here. Not because you are exceptional. Because you were placed specifically in this position, in this generation, for this exact purpose. Take a breath. What you just received is significant, and I do not want you to move past it the way we move past most things that matter, quickly, partially, leaving most of it sitting on the surface instead of letting it go where it needs to go. So just for a moment, before anything else, let it land. You came into this message believing you were behind. You are leaving it understanding that you were being built. You came in carrying the weight of years you thought were simply lost. You are leaving knowing that every one of them was invested in the root system, in the character, in the formation that made what is about to happen possible. You came in wondering if God had quietly moved on, if perhaps He had reassigned what was once yours to someone who had been more consistent, more ready, more deserving of the weight being over. You are leaving with the word of someone who heard Him say, "I am still here. I was always here. The window is open right now." You came in measuring yourself by a human clock that was never built for the kind of assignment you carry. You are walking out, living from a different kind of time entirely. Now, understanding is one thing, moving is another. And I want to give you the final practical piece before I release you into what comes after this. I call this the now window practice. Not because the window should make you anxious, but because real windows require real movement, and movement needs to be specific to actually mean anything. 3 things in the next 24 hours, not as a project, as a signal to the part of you that has been waiting to respond, and to the unseen realm that is watching for your movement. The first is to name one thing you have been delaying, not a list. One thing. The specific thing that comes to mind immediately when I say the word calling the thing you already know, the one you have been circling around for longer than you want to say. You do not need to write it down right now. I just want you to say it inside yourself, clearly, without softening it with qualifications or conditions. Just name it. The second is to run the Kairos audit on that one thing. Ask yourself honestly, is what is stopping me right now a genuine lack of readiness, or is it the fear of what readiness would cost me? You will know the answer when you ask the question without protecting yourself from the answer. And the third is to make one move, not the full plan, not the complete commitment. One move, one message you have been holding back, one application you have been finding reasons to postpone, one conversation you have been avoiding because having it would make things real, one internal decision that signals to everything waiting on the other side that you have heard the commissioning and you are responding to it. Kairos does not ask for a finished product. It asks for a first step, and a first step, even a small one, even an imperfect one, in the direction of what you were built for, is the signal that invites what has been waiting to finally arrive. There is something more I want to tell you about the woman I described earlier, the one who found the synchronicities after years of genuine searching. She did not stay where that discovery left her. 3 months later, she wrote something that has stayed with me. She said, "I am doing the work I always knew I was meant to do. I cannot explain what exactly changed, but I stopped pushing against the direction of my own life and started moving with it. And when I stopped pushing, everything I had been reaching toward began reaching back." She proved something real, that when a person returns to their original frequency, the one they were born carrying, the one the years of modern life had suppressed, the path that was always there becomes visible again. Not because the path changed, because the person finally has the clarity to see what was always in front of them. Now I want to do one final thing with you, before I release you into what comes after this message. If you are in a place right now where you can be still for just a moment, I want you to come with me here. In your mind, I want you to imagine that you are standing up from the place where you have been sitting in waiting, not physically. The part of you that has been in that holding place, the part that has been saying, "Not yet, not ready, not sure," let that part rise. Now picture a door. It is standing fully open, not cracked, not slightly ajar. Fully open, the way a door looks when something that was sealed for a long time has finally been unlocked. And it has been standing like this longer than you realized, held open, waiting. On the other side of that door is not a different life. It is this life, the same life you have been living, but inhabited by the person you were formed to be. And if you could look through that doorway right now and see yourself on the other side, the version of you who walked through and did not look back, that person would not be unrecognizable. They would be completely you, recognizably, undeniably you, just no longer carrying the weight that was never meant to be permanent. And that version of you is looking back at you right now, not with urgency, not with frustration, with something quieter than that. They are simply saying, "It is exactly as you hoped it would be." And the only distance between here and there is the decision to walk through. Now, I want to speak something over you before you go. Not as an encouraging closing thought, as a declaration, as a sealing over what was received in this message. May the years of waiting become the visible foundation of everything you build from this point forward, so that everyone who watches what rises in your life will understand that what stands tall was not built in a rush, but rooted in something they cannot see. May the wilderness season be recognized by you first, and then by everyone who witnesses what happens next, as the training ground it always was, and never the punishment it appeared to be. May the door that is open right now remain visible to you, not just in this moment, but in every future moment, when the old pattern rises and tries to convince you to step back from the threshold again. May the shalom, the overpayment, the restoration beyond what was lost, the return that exceeds the investment, begin arriving in your life in ways so specific and so disproportionate that every remaining doubt about whether you heard correctly is removed. And may you never again measure yourself against a clock that was not built for the kind of assignment you carry. And I hear the Father speaking this final word over the one who stayed through to the end of this message. My child, you are not late. You are mine. And I have been waiting for you, not with frustration, not with a tally of the ways you have been slow to arrive, not with any thought of replacement, but with the specific kind of anticipation that only belongs to a father watching a child become who they were always intended to be. I saw every year of the wait. I was present in every moment that felt like silence. And I am saying to you now, go. Not because the fear is completely gone, because I will go with you. Not because you are finished becoming, because you are ready enough. And what is ahead of you, what I have been arranging while you were being formed, it is worth every year you spent in the wilderness getting ready for it. Go. I will be with you every step. You are commissioned. You are equipped. You are sent. This message found you today because something arranged for it to. What you carry matters more than you have been able to fully believe during the waiting season. And there are people, some whose names you do not yet know, who are on the other side of your yes, waiting for what your life will make possible for them.